before we dive into this life-changing revelation that will completely transform your understanding of existence itself, I need to ask you something. What time is it where you are right now? And where are you watching from? I'm asking because time and location are about to become incredibly significant as we uncover the forbidden truth about what happens in those crucial first 7 minutes after death. The knowledge that ancient mystery schools guarded with their lives, that modern institutions desperately want to keep hidden from you. And that will change everything you thought you knew about consciousness, reality, and your eternal soul's journey. You see, they've spent centuries conditioning us to fear death, to see it as an ending, a void, a terrifying unknown. But what if I told you that's the biggest lie ever perpetuated upon humanity? What if those first 7 minutes aren't the end of consciousness, but the most extraordinary beginning of an adventure that spans dimensions, time, and space itself? What if death is actually the moment when your soul breaks free from the prison of physical matter and embarks on the most incredible journey through realms that exist beyond our wildest imagination? Tonight, we're going to expose the forbidden evidence that's been hidden in ancient Tibetan texts, Egyptian mystery schools, Hermetic teachings, and even modern near-death research that's been suppressed by those who profit from keeping humanity in spiritual darkness and ignorance about our true divine nature. The moment your physical heart stops beating and your brain waves begin to flatline, something absolutely miraculous begins to unfold that the mainstream medical establishment will never tell you about, because it would shatter their entire materialistic worldview and threaten the control systems that depend on your fear of death and ignorance about your soul's immortality. In that very first minute after clinical death, while doctors are declaring your body lifeless, your consciousness, your real self, is experiencing the most profound liberation it has known since the moment you incarnated into this physical dimension. Ancient Tibetan Buddhists called this the Bardo Thodol, the intermediate state between death and rebirth. And they spent lifetimes studying and mapping exactly what happens during these precious minutes because they understood that death is not an ending but a sacred transition, a doorway into higher dimensions of existence that most humans never even dream of experiencing while trapped in their physical bodies. The Egyptians knew this too. That's why their entire civilization was built around death preparation. Why the pyramids were constructed as massive consciousness-expanding machines. Why their pharaohs spent decades learning the sacred arts of soul navigation through the afterlife realms. They understood that those first 7 minutes after death are when the soul makes crucial decisions that determine its next phase of existence. Whether it will ascend to higher dimensions or get pulled back into another cycle of physical incarnation. But here's where it gets absolutely mind-blowing. Modern science, particularly the research conducted by Dr. Sam Parnia at New York University and Dr. Pim van Lommel in the Netherlands, has discovered that consciousness continues to function for up to 20 minutes after the heart stops beating, completely contradicting everything we've been taught about brain death and the nature of consciousness itself. They've documented cases where patients have had the most vivid, detailed experiences of their lives, while their brains showed zero electrical activity. Experiences so profound and transformative that they come back as completely different people, with expanded psychic abilities, deep spiritual wisdom, and absolute certainty that consciousness exists independent of the physical brain. Yet this research is being suppressed, buried in obscure medical journals, dismissed as hallucinations or oxygen deprivation. Because if humanity truly understood what happens in those first 7 minutes after death, the entire foundation of our materialistic, fear-based society would crumble overnight. The moment your physical heart stops beating and your brain waves begin to flatline. something absolutely miraculous begins to unfold that the mainstream medical establishment will never tell you about, because it would shatter their entire materialistic worldview and threaten the control systems that depend on your fear of death and ignorance about your soul's immortality. In that very first minute after clinical death, while doctors are declaring your body lifeless, your consciousness, your real self, is experiencing the most profound liberation it has known since the moment you incarnated into this physical dimension. Ancient Tibetan Buddhists called this the Bardo Thodol, the intermediate state between death and rebirth, and they spent lifetimes studying and mapping exactly what happens during these precious minutes because they understood that death is not an ending but a sacred transition, a doorway into higher dimensions of existence that most humans never even dream of experiencing while trapped in their physical bodies. The Egyptians knew this too. That's why their entire civilization was built around death preparation, why the pyramids were constructed as massive consciousness-expanding machines, why their pharaohs spent decades learning the sacred arts of soul navigation through the afterlife realms. They understood that those first 7 minutes after death are when the soul makes crucial decisions that determine its next phase of existence, whether it will ascend to higher dimensions or get pulled back into another cycle of physical incarnation. But here's where it gets absolutely mind-blowing: modern science, particularly the research conducted by Dr. Sam Parnia at New York University and Dr. Pim van Lommel in the Netherlands, has discovered that consciousness continues to function for up to 20 minutes after the heart stops beating, completely contradicting everything we've been taught about brain death and the nature of consciousness itself. They've documented cases where patients have had the most vivid, detailed experiences of their lives while their brains showed zero electrical activity. Experiences so profound and transformative that they come back as completely different people, with expanded psychic abilities, deep spiritual wisdom, and absolute certainty that consciousness exists independent of the physical brain. Yet this research is being suppressed, buried in obscure medical journals, dismissed as hallucinations or oxygen deprivation. Because if humanity truly understood what happens in those first 7 minutes after death, the entire foundation of our materialistic, fear-based society would crumble overnight. Let me tell you exactly what happens in that first minute after your heart stops. Your consciousness, which has been compressed and limited by the dense vibrations of physical matter for your entire lifetime, suddenly begins to expand like a cosmic explosion of awareness. The electromagnetic field that surrounds your body, what ancient traditions call the aura or light body, begins to separate from your physical form, rising upward like a luminous mist that contains the entire essence of who you truly are. This isn't your imagination. This isn't metaphor. This is documented by Kirlian photography, by electromagnetic field detectors placed around dying patients, by thermal imaging that shows heat signatures leaving the body at the moment of death. Your consciousness, freed from the constraints of physical sensory input, suddenly has access to a 360-degree perception of reality that extends far beyond anything you've ever experienced while alive. You can see everything, not just with your eyes, but with a type of omnidirectional awareness that encompasses past, present, and future simultaneously. Many near-death experiencers report being able to see their entire life spread out like a vast tapestry. Every moment, every decision, every connection they ever made with another soul, all visible at once in perfect crystalline clarity. But this isn't just memory. This is living reality, where every experience you ever had is still happening in the eternal now, where every person you ever loved is still connected to you by golden threads of light that extend across dimensions and through time itself. The Hermetic teachings describe this as entering the Akashic records, the cosmic library where every thought, emotion, and experience that has ever occurred is stored in the fabric of consciousness itself. You're not just remembering your life. You're experiencing it from a divine perspective, seeing how every joy and every pain, every triumph and every struggle was perfectly orchestrated to help your soul evolve and expand into greater levels of love and wisdom. By the second minute after death, something even more extraordinary occurs. You begin to encounter what the Tibetan Book of the Dead calls the clear light of reality. A blindingly brilliant radiance that isn't just illumination but pure consciousness itself, the source light from which all existence emerges and to which all existence returns. This isn't just metaphysical poetry. Modern near-death researchers have documented that virtually every person who has experienced clinical death reports encountering this overwhelming light that radiates infinite love, wisdom, and acceptance. But here's what they don't tell you in the sanitized, New Age versions of near-death experiences. This light is also a test, a crucial moment where your soul's evolution is measured and your next phase of existence is determined. The ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead describes this as the weighing of the heart ceremony, where your soul stands before the cosmic judges and your entire lifetime is evaluated based on how much you've grown in love, compassion, and spiritual understanding. If your heart is heavy with unresolved karma, negative emotions, and spiritual ignorance, you experience this light as terrifying, overwhelming, unbearable, and your consciousness immediately begins to contract, pulling you away from the divine realms and back toward another cycle of physical incarnation where you'll have another chance to learn the lessons you missed in this lifetime. But if you've spent your life developing spiritual awareness, practicing compassion, and expanding your consciousness through meditation, service, and inner work, this light becomes the most beautiful, welcoming presence you've ever encountered. The very essence of divine love calling you home to your true nature as an eternal, unlimited being of pure consciousness. The third minute after death is when you encounter what mystics throughout history have called the beings of light. But these aren't angels with wings and harps like religious art depicts them. These are advanced consciousness entities, souls who have transcended the cycle of physical incarnation and now exist as pure awareness in the higher dimensional realms. Some are what we might call spirit guides, souls who have been connected to you across multiple lifetimes, helping to orchestrate your spiritual growth and evolution from behind the scenes. Others are family members and loved ones who have passed before you, but you'll be shocked to discover that they appear not as you remember them in their physical bodies, but as radiant beings of light who embody the highest aspects of their consciousness, free from all the limitations, fears, and illusions that characterize their earthly personalities. The most profound encounters, according to the ancient mystery school teachings, are with what the Gnostics called the Eons, cosmic beings who represent different aspects of divine consciousness. These encounters aren't random. They're specifically designed to help your soul integrate the lessons of your most recent lifetime and prepare for whatever comes next in your eternal journey of consciousness expansion. Some near-death experiencers report receiving downloads of cosmic knowledge during these encounters, sudden understanding of the nature of reality, the purpose of existence, the interconnectedness of all life. Information so vast and profound that when they return to physical life, they spend years trying to translate these revelations into human language. The ancient Hermetic axiom, "As above, so below," takes on completely new meaning when you realize that these higher dimensional beings are actually future versions of ourselves. What we're all evolving toward as we shed the illusions of separation and remember our true nature as fragments of the one infinite consciousness that is the source and substance of all existence. During the fourth minute after death, your consciousness begins what the ancient mystery schools called the sacred review. But this isn't the judgmental, punitive experience that fear-based religions have conditioned us to expect. Instead, it's the most compassionate, healing process imaginable, where you experience your entire life from multiple perspectives simultaneously. Not just your own viewpoint, but the perspective of every person you ever interacted with, every animal you encountered, every plant you touched, every element of nature that was affected by your presence on Earth. This isn't about punishment or guilt. It's about understanding, about seeing how every single action, thought, and emotion you ever had created ripples that spread out across the web of existence, affecting countless other beings in ways you never realized while trapped in the limited perspective of physical incarnation. The Akashic records reveal themselves as a living, breathing entity that contains not just information, but the actual experience of every moment that has ever occurred in the history of consciousness. You don't just see what happened. You feel it, you live it, you experience the joy you brought to others and the pain you caused, not from a place of shame, but from a place of infinite compassion and understanding that helps your soul integrate every lesson from your earthly journey. Many near-death experiencers report that during this review, they're accompanied by beings of tremendous wisdom and love who help them understand the deeper purpose behind even their most challenging experiences. They realize that every betrayal taught them about loyalty, every loss taught them about love, every failure taught them about resilience, and every moment of suffering was actually their soul's way of expanding its capacity for compassion and empathy. The review becomes a celebration of how far their consciousness has evolved, a recognition of the courage it took to incarnate into physical density and face all the challenges necessary for spiritual growth. The fifth minute after death is perhaps the most crucial, because this is when your soul reaches what the Tibetan tradition calls the first bardo, the moment of ultimate choice where you determine the trajectory of your consciousness for potentially eons to come. Ancient wisdom traditions understood that souls at this stage face three fundamental paths. The first path is what Buddhism calls liberation, the opportunity to merge completely with the clear light of reality and transcend the cycle of death and rebirth forever, becoming one with the source consciousness from which all existence emerges. But here's the secret that most spiritual teachings won't tell you. This path requires that you've already achieved a level of consciousness expansion during your physical life that allows you to recognize and embrace this infinite light without fear or resistance. The second path is what's known as the peaceful deities, where souls who aren't quite ready for complete liberation enter into higher dimensional realms where they continue their spiritual education in environments of perfect beauty, wisdom, and love. These are the heavenly realms described in various religious traditions, but they're not permanent destinations. They're advanced schools for consciousness where souls prepare for either higher liberation or choose to return to physical incarnation with greater wisdom and expanded awareness. The third path is what the ancient texts call the wrathful deities. And this is where most souls end up because they haven't developed enough spiritual awareness during their physical lives to recognize these intimidating manifestations as projections of their own unresolved fears and negative karmic patterns. These wrathful beings aren't demons trying to punish you. They're actually compassionate forces of the universe trying to burn away the illusions, attachments, and spiritual ignorance that keep your soul trapped in cycles of suffering and limitation. If you react to them with fear and try to escape, Your consciousness contracts, and you're pulled back into physical incarnation. But if you can recognize them as aspects of your own divine nature, and embrace them with love and understanding, they transform into teachers and guides who help accelerate your spiritual evolution. By the 6th minute after death, something absolutely extraordinary happens that ancient mystery schools spent centuries preparing their initiates to navigate successfully. Your consciousness encounters what the Egyptian texts call the Hall of Two Truths, where every illusion you've ever held about reality is systematically dissolved to reveal the fundamental nature of existence itself. This isn't a gentle process. It's a complete deconstruction of everything your ego mind believed to be true about identity, separation, time, space, and the nature of reality. Many souls experience this as terrifying because their entire sense of self was built on these illusions, and watching them dissolve can feel like complete annihilation. But for those who have spent their lives practicing meditation, studying spiritual truth, and cultivating awareness of their eternal nature, this dissolution becomes the most liberating experience possible. The final removal of all the barriers that prevented them from recognizing their true identity as infinite consciousness itself. The ancient Vedantic tradition describes this as moksha, liberation from the dream of separation, where you finally realize that everything you thought was happening to you was actually happening ASU, that every person you ever met was another face of your own divine self, that every experience was consciousness exploring its own infinite potential through the temporary limitation of individual perspective. Modern quantum physics is beginning to validate what these ancient wisdom traditions always knew: that consciousness is the fundamental fabric of reality, that matter is just condensed energy, that energy is just consciousness in motion, and that at the deepest level, there is only one consciousness experiencing itself as the apparent multiplicity of separate beings and phenomena. During this 6th minute, many souls have profound realizations about the nature of time, discovering that past, present, and future are just constructs of limited physical perception, that everything is actually happening simultaneously in the eternal now, that their entire life was just one moment in the infinite dance of consciousness exploring its own nature through endless forms and experiences. The 7th and final minute after death is when your soul faces what the ancient traditions called the Great Choice, the ultimate decision that determines whether you'll continue evolving toward higher dimensions of consciousness or return to physical incarnation for another round of spiritual education through the challenges and opportunities of material existence. But here's the profound secret that's been hidden from humanity for millennia. This choice isn't made by your ego mind or even your personal will. It's made by the deepest, most authentic aspect of your being, the part that knows exactly what experiences your soul needs for its continued evolution and expansion. Some souls, recognizing that they still have karmic patterns to resolve or lessons to learn that can only be mastered through physical incarnation, choose to return to Earth or similar physical dimensions. They select their next lifetime circumstances, their parents, their location, their challenges, their opportunities, with the precision of a master artist choosing colors for a painting, knowing that every detail will provide exactly the experiences needed for their soul's continued growth. Other souls, having completed their physical education, choose to continue their evolution in higher dimensional realms where they become teachers, guides, and assistants to souls still navigating the challenges of material existence. And the most advanced souls choose to transcend individual existence altogether, merging with the source consciousness and becoming part of the infinite intelligence that orchestrates the entire cosmic dance of evolution and expansion. The ancient Hermetic teaching, know thyself, takes on its ultimate meaning in this 7th minute, because you finally see yourself as you truly are, not a separate, limited being struggling through a hostile universe, but an eternal, infinite expression of the one consciousness that is the source, substance, and destination of all existence. You realize that every lifetime has been perfect, that every experience has been necessary, that even your greatest failures and deepest sufferings were precisely calibrated to help you develop the strength, wisdom, and compassion needed to recognize and embody your divine nature. What makes this knowledge forbidden is that if everyone understood what really happens in those first 7 minutes after death, the entire structure of our fear-based society would collapse overnight. Governments depend on citizens who are afraid of death because fearful people are easy to control, easy to manipulate with promises of security and threats of annihilation. Religions depend on followers who believe they need external salvation because people who understand their own divine nature don't need intermediaries between themselves and the divine. Medical establishments depend on patients who see death as the ultimate enemy because people who understand death as a sacred transition don't live in constant anxiety about their physical mortality. Educational systems depend on students who believe that material success is the highest goal because people who understand the eternal nature of consciousness don't sacrifice their spiritual development for temporary worldly achievements. The ancient mystery schools of Egypt, Greece, Tibet, and India all taught these truths openly to their initiated students. But this knowledge was gradually suppressed as religious and political institutions realized that spiritually awakened humans are impossible to control through fear, guilt, shame, and ignorance. The burning of the Library of Alexandria, the destruction of the Gnostic Gospels, the persecution of mystics and shamans throughout history. These weren't random acts of violence. They were systematic attempts to erase humanity's understanding of our true nature and keep us trapped in spiritual amnesia. But the truth has been preserved in hidden texts, encoded in sacred art, whispered through oral traditions, and now it's emerging again because we're entering a new age of consciousness where humanity is ready to remember who we really are and why we're here. The implications of this hidden knowledge extend far beyond just understanding death. It completely transforms how you live every single day of your current incarnation. When you truly understand that your consciousness is eternal and indestructible, that death is just a transition between different states of existence, that every experience in your life is perfectly orchestrated for your soul's evolution, you begin to live with a fearlessness and authenticity that's absolutely revolutionary. You stop wasting energy on petty concerns and meaningless distractions because you recognize that your time in this physical dimension is precious and limited, meant to be used for spiritual growth, loving service, and consciousness expansion. You start paying attention to the synchronicities and signs that are constantly guiding you toward your highest path, because you understand that your spirit guides and higher self are always communicating with you, helping you navigate toward experiences that will accelerate your evolution. You begin to see every person you meet as another aspect of your own divine self, every challenge as an opportunity for growth, every moment of beauty as a reminder of the infinite creativity and love that is your true nature. Most importantly, you stop living in the future or dwelling in the past, because you realize that this eternal now moment is where your power lies, where transformation happens, where you can align with the flow of consciousness that's always guiding you toward greater love, wisdom, and spiritual awakening. You understand that preparing for death isn't about religious rituals or dogmatic beliefs. It's about developing the spiritual awareness and emotional maturity needed to navigate those crucial 7 minutes with grace, courage, and wisdom. It's about living each day as if it might be your last physical experience. Not from fear, but from the recognition that every moment is a gift, every breath is sacred, every opportunity to love and serve is a chance to evolve your consciousness toward its ultimate destiny as a fully awakened, liberated being of infinite light and wisdom. The time has come for humanity to reclaim this forbidden knowledge that's been hidden from us for centuries. To remember that we are not limited physical beings having occasional spiritual experiences, but unlimited spiritual beings having a temporary physical experience. And that death is not the end of our story, but the beginning of an adventure that's more magnificent than anything we can imagine while trapped in these dense material bodies. The 7 minutes after death are just the gateway to an existence of unimaginable beauty, wisdom, love, and creative power that awaits every soul brave enough to embrace the truth of their divine nature and live in alignment with the highest aspects of their eternal being. Your consciousness is preparing for this transition every single night when you dream, every time you meditate, every moment you experience love, compassion, wonder, or spiritual insight. You're not just learning how to live. You're learning how to die consciously, and how to return to this physical dimension with greater wisdom, deeper love, and expanded awareness of who you truly are, and why you chose to be here during this incredible time of planetary awakening and consciousness evolution. The secret is no longer hidden. It's here for those with eyes to see and hearts open enough to embrace the most beautiful truth in existence. You are eternal, you are infinite, you are loved beyond measure, and your journey of consciousness has only just begun. Thank you for joining me on this profound journey into the forbidden truth about what happens in those crucial first 7 minutes after death. If this revelation has touched your soul and awakened something deep within your being, you know that your consciousness is already preparing for that sacred transition and the magnificent adventures that await beyond the veil of physical existence. Keep seeking, keep awakening, and remember, you are so much more than you've been taught to believe.